kettle full. First things first. 7:05, close enough. All right, now, number 10, boil before, obviously. It is quite a dining experience, to say the least. Door County is definitely home to the fish boils. We've been doing traditional fish boils here at the old post office restaurant since 1970.
You're right.
43 years.
Motivation.
I've been doing them here for the last 7 years. We do this in every single type of weather condition Mother Nature can throw at you because we do not close down or anything. So rain or shine, we still do the fish boils, even if it's pouring down rain out back here. So these can be done in the rain. We do it all the time. It's not any fun, and nobody usually comes out to watch it. Now, before you guys all get here, I fill the kettle up with 25 gallons of water, 3 cups of salt going to the water. Salt is the only seasoning you put into a fish boil. That's pretty much all the Norwegian settlers had back in the old days. However, that does season everything quite well. The fish, the potatoes, and the onions. You get your fire burning. It takes about a half hour or so to get the water to start to boil. Once the water's boiling, you start your timer at 30 minutes. Each fish boil takes a half an hour. We're gonna put a little kerosene on this thing. Whoa. Just to get it boiling again. It'll be boiling in another minute or two. You get your fire burning. It takes about a half hour to get the water to start to boil. Once the water's boiling, you start your timer at 30 minutes. Each fish boil takes a half an hour. Potatoes go in the kettle first for the whole half an hour. Onions go in the kettle second, depending on the size. Fish you put in for the last 7 minutes. And like I said earlier, the fish we do use, they're fresh. They're locally caught Lake Michigan whitefish. They're caught from both sides of Door County, both Lake Michigan side and Bay side, depending on the time of year. This time of the year, in the summer, almost all the fishing is done way out on the bay. Once the fall rolls around, it almost all switches over to the Lake Michigan side of the peninsula, just because that's the way all the whitefish schools move around. Now, we do buy all of our fish from a local fisherman right here in Door County. We get ours from a guy named Rick Johnson. He's a fisherman from Gills Rock, which is all the way up to the tip of the peninsula. He's been bringing the restaurant fresh whitefish for almost 40 years now. So just about every other morning, spring, summer, fall, rain or shine, him and his crew get into their boats. They head out to their whitefish nets. The nets all get pulled in by a mechanical winch. The fish get taken back to their little processing facility in Gills Rock, and that's where they clean them all. They head them, gut them, kale them, and scale them there. And then just about every other day between 3 and 4 o'clock, you'll bring a fresh whitefish to the back of the restaurant. You bring the guy who catches them just about every other day. He'll also cut them up for you like this if you want. They have a machine that does it, or you buy them whole and you cut the fish up all by yourself. Well, we always buy them whole, and then I hand cut them all myself with a big razor sharp knife right before I bring them up, put them in the kettle. For every fish boil, it's the best way to do this. Cut the fish up right before you boil them. If you buy them pre-cut or even cut them up yourself ahead of time, they start to drain a lot of their natural fluids out right away, and they just kind of shrink and deflate and dry out on you a little bit. So it's definitely a little bit more work for me to cut up all the fish, but it is a much better fish boil for you guys if we do it that way. And on an average season, I cut up and boil about 35,000 pounds of them. So, yes, we go through a ton of them up here. Luckily, we're always able to get fresh ones right out of our own local waters up here. So, now the fish boil, this is an old Scandinavian tradition. It was started off by Swedish and Norwegian immigrants back in the 1800s up here in Door County. Northern Door County, where you guys are at, very rich in Scandinavian heritage. You kind of see it all over up here. Fish boils are part of our old Scandinavian heritage as well. Most of the Swedes and Norwegians who settled here back in the 1800s, they homesteaded up here in Door County. Basically got free land by the government just to move up to the area so they could start establishing growth to the upper Great Lakes. Some of them came up here and fished. Most of them came up here and worked in the logging industry. Those probably would have been the 2 jobs back in the 1800s up here in Door County. There was plenty of fish in the waters, and the peninsula itself was heavily forested. Now, I'm pretty sure the fish boil was never intended to become a tourist attraction like it is today. This would have been done in logging camps and fishing villages back in the 1800s up here. It probably would have just been an easy way to feed all the large groups of Scandinavian immigrants who were starting to settle up here on this remote peninsula. They had plenty of fish in the water, well, potatoes, onions, butter, salt, 5 simple ingredients in a big kettle like this. They would do fish boils like this, and it would have just been used to feed the tiny little communities back in the 1800s, which were really nothing more than logging camps and fishing villages at the time. So that's how it all started off. It wasn't until around the turn of the century people started to really appreciate all this natural beauty we have up here in Door County. They quit logging all the forests. They started preserving areas for state parks, and they started to build and open the first hotels and resorts for tourists, including the Edgewater Resort. Opened up in the year 1900. It was one of the first hotels to open up here in the village of Ypres. So right around that time, Door County started getting its very first tourists. Unlike today where we get over 2 million visitors up here every summer, if you came to Door County back in those days, you came up here by steamship. They didn't build any roads or highways this far north on the peninsula until the late 1920s, so they started bringing tourists up here from Chicago and Milwaukee during the summertime on steamships. And if you were coming all the way up here from Chicago on a steamship back in those days, you probably weren't coming up for a long weekend or a day trip like people do nowadays. It took a good 12 to 13 hours just to get all the way up here. Most of the guests who did come up here and stay, they were quite well off, and they'd spend a few weeks to a few months up here during the summertime. And back in those days, when you stayed at a hotel or resort here in Door County, they cooked all of your meals for you while you stayed there as well. They called it the American plan. Well, some of those old resorts and hotels started to do fish boils for their guests, and that's how this tradition was born here in Door County. We've basically been doing fish boils the traditional way, just like this for the tourists, ever since. You can see this does go back well over a century. It's definitely a Door County original tradition, and you can date it all the way back to the very first year of the settlers of Door County. So it's a pretty neat thing. It's stuck around so long. We still do it the traditional way like this, using firewood. And very soon a can of kerosene, which I have right over here. Now the kerosene thing at the end, this is probably something that was discovered by accident if I had to take a guess. But the last thing that you do at a fish boil, that is before you go inside to eat it, is the boil over. Once you get all this stuff cooking in the kettle like this, you start to get this layer of foam, scum, and even ash from the fire that simmers up to the surface. So some genius along the way came up with the boil over, where you throw a can of kerosene into the fire, makes a huge fireball, makes a great picture as well, so have your camera ready for it. But more importantly, it makes the whole kettle boil over, and all the foam and ash and gunk from the top right along with it. It actually works quite genius. You'll see for yourself in a moment. After the boil over, you guys go right ahead, walk back in between the two buildings, go right to your assigned tables. We bring everyone a plate with a couple of whitefish steaks. You get boiled baby red potatoes, a boiled onion. You put melted butter all over the top of that. You also get homemade breads, homemade coleslaw, and for dessert, a slice of Door County cherry pie. Woo. Enjoy, it is quite a feast. Also, if you're new to Door County, grab one of my flyers I have up here. I was born and raised on the peninsula. I did print off a bunch of key places to visit for new people, so if you're new, feel free to grab one of those. And I also have a tip kettle, and tips are always appreciated, so thank you so much for that. Get your cameras ready. I'm going to throw this into the fire. You guys are there. Sound good? You want to come on up? I'm kidding. Stay right where you're at, buddy.
Oh my
Ready?
God.
1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Try that at home.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed all the
You guys are gonna do that? He probably tripped and stumbled.
That's fun, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
A little hot.
Oh, God, yeah.
I never would have known that.
At least it wasn't windy like the last one. When the wind blew the fire all over the place.
Yeah, so now we got to do it.